Hey there everyone, and welcome to another tutorial video. I'm going to be showing you how to take your model and put it into Vtube Studio. Generally speaking, everything I've done in my tutorials all still applies to Vtube Studio. There is just very slightly different approaches to how you would go about, say, making your animations play out, as well as creating on and off toggles. In some ways you could say it may be considered a little bit more easier. I just wanted to touch on the things you would have to do though, so things like my wave, like this, and being able to do other emotions such as this. So these can all still be applied normally in Vtube Studio, no problem at all. But just to touch base on everything, I, for the longest time, haven't been able to use Vtube Studio because of the fact that I just never owned an iPad or an iPhone of a good quality. I've always wanted to use Vtube Studio, and now they have finally made a Steam version that you can download for free to try out, and literally you can give it a go, see what you think of it already, and it's awesome. So I'm going to get on with the video and show you how to go about making your on and off toggles as well as adding animations to your rig. So to get started with adding animations as well as on and off toggles for your Vtuber model to be used in Vtube Studio, make sure that you have your Vtuber model files. If you're unsure about how to set those things up, generally, I have lots of videos on that already, so please do check those ones out in terms of how to export your model and how to go about laying out your files. In my case though, I have in fact a CFG file which is from the FaceRig software. You don't actually need a CFG file anymore. You could go ahead and delete that if you wanted to, if you plan to not use FaceRig anymore. But generally speaking, I would just keep it aside just in case you do happen to want to go back to FaceRig for whatever reason. But just to throw it out there, generally you do not need a CFG file for Vtube Studio. In terms of Vtube Studio and just the general layout of your Vtuber model, it's always good practice to put everything in a folder format. So in this case, like in previous videos, I obviously have my motion file which has a couple of animations that I've already done in the past. I now have a new folder though here called expressions. That's a new folder that I've included into this Vtuber model file so that I can house all the expressions for Vtube Studio. These will be your on and off toggles. When you download Live2D Cubism, you should have something called Live2D Cubism Viewer. If you don't have this, feel free to download it off their website. All you have to do is double click and you'll get a window pop up. They'll ask you to drop a mock-free file. In this case, this is your Vtuber model, which is this file here. So just drag your mock-free file into this window here. Now you'll see your entirety of your Vtuber model in this window. To start creating your expressions for your Vtuber model, you have to go on File, Add, Expression. You can literally call this whatever you want. You can keep it as Expression 1, or you can name it whatever you want. I'm just going to call this Expression 4 in my case, because I've already got 3 expressions already. And click OK. Now you'll have a new folder in the side window called Expressions. Click on the new expression file you've created, and now you'll see all of your parameters listed here. Now just to emphasize here, I have done videos on how to make your own on and off toggles, so feel free to check those videos out if you want to learn more about how to actually create an on and off toggle for your Vtuber model. In my case, I have a few different toggles for my character. I have one called Talking Expression, and to make the toggle happen, you have to bring the slider all the way to the end like this. Now that you've turned on your expression, right click on your expression file here and go on Save As. Click on your new expressions file and click Save. And you have effectively saved your file. As far as your animations go, you don't have to do anything different. If you follow my special actions/animation tutorial in my beginners tutorial series, you'll know how to effectively save an animation file to be used. Just please watch the video and it will give you all of the information that you need on how to export an animation file for use for both FaceRig and Vtube Studio. Okay, so this is Vtube Studio. If you would like to download Vtube Studio on your PC, it is currently available on Steam. You can get it for free to try out, but you will get like a little GIF animation of a character if you don't pay for their DLC to remove the watermark. But it's a really great way to test out the software, see how you feel about it, have a play around with it and such, and if you really want to use it for everything VTubing, then you can download their DLC, which is effectively, in my opinion, just purchasing the software. I do recommend it because it also helps the developers themselves to be able to continue doing what they're doing, and I think it's such a fantastic face tracking software at this point. I do recommend it, but do see what you think about the software and make a decision from there. So if you want to import your Vtuber model into Vtube Studio, it's a very similar method as to FaceRig, only obviously they're different naming conventions for files and such, so I'll show you how to do that right now. Okay, now that you've downloaded Vtube Studio, all you have to do is right click on Vtube Studio, then Properties. Click on Local Files, and then Browse. Go into Vtube Studio Data, then Streaming Assets, and Live2D Models. This is where you would paste your Vtuber model file. Since I've already pasted mine, I don't need to do that right now, but I just wanted to show you the location of where you would paste your own Vtuber model. Once you've pasted it into this folder, launch Vtube Studio. Click on this icon here and locate your Vtuber model file here. You won't have an icon, but you do have a choice to add your own icons. In my case, I'm going to load up my YouTube Vtuber model. It will also tell you how you can resize your model here, so how to move model, click and drag. So all you have to do is just click off that and then there we go. I currently have my model so that it's set up for audio-based lip sync, which we'll go into soon. But to set up, let's go into the cog here. So these are the options for Vtube Studio. If you go onto the camera here, you can set up your camera. So I'm going to turn the camera on. Now normally they do actually say to pull a few faces, let's say with the webcam, to get it warmed up. So what I tend to do is like really scrunch up my face and close it and like do a happy expression almost sort of thing. So I do it, really scrunch up my face. And then I'll do like a big O face or something with my eyes wide open and my eyebrows up. So just do those kinds of exercises. It's a good warm-up, let's say, for your own face, but generally speaking, do that so that the webcam is warmed up for the facial recognition software. Once you've done that, look directly at the webcam normally and click Calibrate. Now it should be calibrated to your Vtuber model. Once you're all set up, just click on this icon here. Now you're going to see there's a whole list of different expressions for me because I've already set up some expressions for my Vtuber model. So I'm just going to scroll all the way down. When you start out, you won't have a list. If you want to create a hotkey shortcut, click on the plus button here and you'll have a new shortcut you can edit. Go on hotkey action. And if you want to create an on and off toggle, you select the set unset expression. And then you have to highlight the expression file. So select the expression button like that and find the new expression. In my case, mine is the 4th expression, so I'm going to select it. And then we have to map a shortcut key for it. So to create a shortcut, just click on record and then click on whatever button you want to use for your shortcut. And if you want a secondary shortcut button, click on record here. And in my case, I'm just going to press the 4 key. So that means I have set my shortcut so that if I go Control 4, it will turn off and it will also turn on like this. So we've effectively created a hotkey. Now be sure to name it whatever you want so it's a bit easier to navigate in the future. So I'm going to call it talking expression. Press enter and it's done. Now the screen button hotkey here is these buttons on the side of the software here. You can't see them very well, but they're like on-screen shortcut buttons. You can only have up to 8 of these buttons on the screen, however. But I don't think there is a limit to how many shortcuts and how many hotkeys you can create in Vtube Studio. The only thing is if you do rely on hotkeys using the software, you can only have up to 8 on the side here. So it's just something to bear in mind if that's a thing that concerns you at all. So in my case, I could set a screen button hotkey on the side here to 4. And now I've got a 4th button. Now I'm going to show you how to create a temporary animation. So of course, again, click on the plus button and go on hotkey action. So this one here, play animation that says motion free. Click on that and select it. Now go on the animation button here and select which animation you would like to add to your model. So in my case, I'm going to select stars and then create a shortcut key like before. So I'm going to go Control and 6 on the second key there. So if we were to activate the shortcut right now, you'll see the animation play out. And then it disappears. So we're going to move on to just showing you a little bit of the options that you have for your VTuber model. If we go into the options here, we can give ourselves an icon for our character. So you can create whatever icon you want on the side. You can upload it and make it known because currently there is no icon. You can go into this and probably you need to put the icon in the actual VTuber model folder to be able to select it. But you can most likely put your own icon in there. And you can also add an idle animation, which is huge to me, absolutely huge. This is going to help you create your own ideal idle animations for your VTuber model. In the previous video that I did, the only way you could create idle animations in FaceRig was to use the breathing parameter. In this case, Vtube Studio allows you to create an idle animation using a motion-free file. So effectively, you can animate in Live2D, create a motion-free file, but make sure obviously that the animation itself does properly loop, and you can effectively add it to the idle animation section here. None of them are idle animations, sadly, so I can't give you an example, but it is the same kind of motion-free file, of course. It's just all you have to do is create a looping motion for your character. So if your character, say for example, has ears that flicker, or they have a swaying tail, or they have wings and such, you can make them move the way you want them to move using the motion free file when animating them in the timeline of Live2D. This is huge, just simply because in FaceRig we could only ever use the breathing parameter, which has a set timing and pacing for when the movement happens. So in terms of movement, there wasn't a hell of a lot we could do in terms of editing it to the right timing. Now we can literally do whatever we want in terms of an idle animation. Now, this is something I completely forgot to mention because I've already been through it, but when you load up your Vtuber model for the very first time, the software will prompt you to create parameters for your model on Vtube Studio. Always say yes to it, because Vtube Studio needs to know what parameters that you're using for your model. So don't cancel out of it, just accept it. This is actually a kind of a similar setup here. This is almost like a reset of the parameters, which I'm not going to go through. But when you first load up your Vtuber model, it will literally say it's going to create new parameters based off your default Live2D parameter names, as it says right here. So always make sure that you actually let it do that. Otherwise, you're going to have no parameters to work with, and it's going to be a little harder to navigate. But if for whatever reason you wanted to reset those parameters to default or whatever, this is the way you would do it. Now, movement config. So this is another new feature. When you move side to side like this, you can see there's an additional movement going on with my Vtuber model. I can also move forwards as well and backwards. And it's a really awesome feature because it really does add a little bit more movement to the character than it did previously on FaceRig. So say if I was to just increase this a little bit more, you'll see what I mean by like added additional movement. Because it's a bit hard to tell, but if I was to just bring these up a little bit, you can see that when I go near to the webcam like this, there's far more additional movement going on. Now, of course, that's very exaggerated movement. Some people may not want that. In my case, I actually prefer to go a bit subtle. Having said that, though, it's better to kind of bring it nearest to the middle. If you go into the minus, it tends to flip the movement like that. It makes it inverted in a sense. So for me anyway, it's far better to just bring it in the middle around this sort of point. I tend to leave it on something like 5, and then maybe lower the Z to about 3, because I just don't want too much of an exaggerated movement, right? But play around with it, see what you prefer. This is another really awesome feature where you can play around with the physics. You can also disable physics if that's what you want to do using this toggle here. But you can give a minimal strength to the physics and a max strength. So basically you bring it to max, it means that everything will be super exaggerated in terms of the physics in general. I like to keep it on 50-50 because I don't want it to be too exaggerated, but obviously if you bring it to minimum, it won't do any physics at all. So I like to keep it about 50. Wind strength is awesome. Again, I love this because it gives it like a sense of idle animation almost for whatever physics you have on your Vtuber model. So in my case, like if you can imagine wind through your hair, is a very subtle movement going on with your hair. So not only do you have physics for every time you move your head and stuff, but you've also, if you're staying still, for example, you'll see there's some slight movement going on. I'll just increase it so you can see it a little bit more. If you turn this off, of course, it will leave it just to the physics of your hair while your character moves. So it's up to you whether you want to keep it to just the physics or add a little bit of idle animation to it, but I just thought it was cool. I love this feature so much. Now as we go down, this is where it may start getting a little confusing, so I'll do my best to explain this as much as possible. Hopefully with a little bit of tweaking for yourself and, you know, trial and error, you might kind of get the general gist of how these options work. So I don't actually touch any of these ones at the top really. But the ones I did find myself having to tweak a little bit was things like the eyes and the eyebrows and the mouth especially. So I'm going to start with the mouth first so we can get the audio-based lip sync stuff working for you guys. Now, You may not really care about this part, but I do, because audio-based lip sync is such a lifesaver in terms of being able to chat and talk and make it seem like I'm actually looking like I'm chatting and talking. It's a little bit hard when you're only using the webcam, because all it takes is to look down and all of a sudden Vtube Studio can't see your mouth, because sadly webcams can't see from a certain angle so well. So the way to tackle situations like that is to use the audio-based lip sync. Your character will talk on the basis of what the microphone picks up, and I find that this feature to be an awesome feature both on FaceRig and Vtube Studio. So just throwing it out there, this is why I think it's such a crucial and such an awesome setting to have, to make it seem like your Vtuber model is actually talking properly. But in this case, just to let you guys know in terms of how to do it, you got mouse smile, which I keep on default pretty much. I have tweaked these settings a little bit so that it works, because the thing that I've been finding with certain settings is that it doesn't quite show, say, the mouth pose that I want on default. So the way that I've dealt with this is to change the parameter values a little bit so that it shows a certain facial expression. So to achieve the audio-based lip sync, we need to go on the input part for open mouth. So this is your mouth open parameter output right here. This is the current ID for the parameter. In this case, in the input, I had to change it to voice volume plus mouth open. Just to explain, if we click on input, you'll find a whole bunch of inputs you can select from. In my case, I want to pick the voice volume so that it detects my voice while I speak, and so that the mouth shapes can change in correspondence to my voice being heard on microphone. So you can pick either voice volume or voice volume plus mouth open. The difference between these two is that this will make your mouth only move to the volume of your voice and nothing else. Literally, the webcam won't take into account any other motions going on with your mouth. It will close when you're silent and it will open when you speak. That's it. But when you pick voice volume plus mouth open, which I personally think is the better option, it not only takes into account the voice that your microphone is hearing and changing out mouth positions as a result of, but it also takes into account the webcam capturing your mouth features as well. So say for example, if I did pick voice volume, if I was to select that, you'll see me speaking right now, but I can't open my mouth. I can't do anything. It's just because of the fact that it is set to voice volume only, I can't open my mouth properly. But if I was to go on input again and then select voice volume plus mouth open, and we select that, I can now open my mouth as normal. Now I will say the mouth shapes that we've actually rigged may need a little bit of tweaking for Vtube Studio, sadly. It seems like that some of the mouth shapes are not quite as relevant. So say me opening my mouth right now, like in an O shape, you can see that my character's teeth are showing, which is not what would have happened in FaceRig. So it's a very easy fix, I will say. It's all a case of just swapping out, say, the top middle keyform for your mouth shape and pasting it into the sad state top keyform, replacing it with a normal O shape. This is where I think it'd be quite crucial to start creating on and off toggles for facial expressions, because there's just no real way with face tracking to show a sad state. I think even in the documentation so far for Vtube Studio, it doesn't actually take into account things like the frowning state of a mouth. So that tells me, in fact, that it's not really something that is even possible to do with face tracking unless it's something as complex as, say, the iPad or the iPhone version of Vtube Studio, where they've got the proper facial recognition. Webcam is just not capable unless they come up with like some really amazing looking face tracking form of webcam that is specifically for this kind of thing. normal webcams are just not able to achieve that same kind of accuracy currently as of now. But anyway, at this point, let's move on to actually showing how to make the volume work. Because now that we've actually applied the input for the voice volume so that the mouth opening is reacting to our voice using the microphone, we do need to set it up so that it works, because when you do this for the first time, it's not going to work. So if you go into the cog and scroll down, we have microphone settings. Of course, you'll have to set your microphone here. So you just click on this and select your microphone. You can preview your microphone audio if you want to, using this tab here. You may have to turn this on too if this is turned off. And here we have is some basic settings for the volume too. You may have to tinker around with this, see what works for you. I think the volume cutoff is stuff like noise gate in terms. So noise gate is used in microphone filtering settings, especially in things like OBS, to cut out background noise effectively. If you're not speaking, you want to be able to have a threshold that says, yes, this is when I'm speaking, and no, this is when I'm not speaking. When you stop speaking, the noise gate shuts, and any background noise that's being heard will get filtered out and will not pick up on the microphone. You may have to, like I say, tinker with these settings though, because it may be unique depending on your living circumstance, how loud it is in the background and such. But yeah, just kind of throwing it out there. I'm not too sure about things like frequency gain and volume gain. I'm not 100% certain as to what these are, but again, you'll kind of get a feel for it. Just keep talking while you edit these settings and you'll probably get it to a point where you're happy with the way your character is speaking. Back to the Vtuber settings. There are so many things that we can edit here. If anything doesn't look right to you, you can tweak them using these values here. And also, when you do load up your model for the first time, you won't actually have this breathing parameter set up. So you can create your own parameter options here. And this is how I created the breathing parameter. So effectively, if you want to add a new parameter, just click on the plus button and you create an output in this case. So just locate the breathing parameter in this case if you're wanting a breathing parameter movement, which is here. In my case, it's already been chosen, so it's in red because of that, but for you it won't be. But if you're someone who's wanting to include your breathing parameter, like normal, this is how you would have to do it. You would have to create your own parameter. But this is how I've set it up. I've put the breathing parameter in the output setting here, and then I enabled auto breathing. And this kind of sets a breathing interval. You can see it in fact moving here, up and down, and that's the set animation for the breathing that they have for this particular software. If you were to go on auto blinking, of course, it's like if you can imagine your character's eyes blinking in terms of motion, that's what it would do instead. I do find these options quite helpful, especially if you're not quite sure what parameter does what. So if you're a little bit confused about what parameter you're looking at and stuff, you can literally just turn on auto blinking and you'll see which parts of your character are actually moving in the moment. So with that, there's this here too. This is called smoothing. This basically smooths out the movement of your character's parameter movement in a sense. So when you move with your character, you can smooth out that movement a little bit. So this is a bad example. I can't really show it with the breathing parameter. To demonstrate the smoothing, I'm using the eye open parameter. In my case, the eye right open. And if I was to bring this down from 12, you'll see that there's a very snappy movement going on with my eyelid closing. But if you smooth it out, you can see that there's a softer closing of the eye. So if I bring it all the way up to max, you can see that it's barely closing. It's like that smoothed out that it has a hard time actually closing. Which is why it's recommended not to bring it all the way to max in certain situations. It also makes it a little bit easier to make eye expressions too, I find. So bringing it to about 12 for me has worked, but it might be different for you. So again, test it out, see how it works for you. Now I'm going to go into the settings here. If you find that your out settings here on the right are not exactly to the values of your parameters, change those values to their exact parameter values. I find this to be the better way, personally, to fine-tune things. If you just apply, in this case, the values of your parameter for the open mouth parameter, we have the closed mouth state, which is at 0, and the open mouth state, which is at number 1. You're going to have to probably need the Live2D model open for yourself to see exactly what values they are, because it could be different depending on your model. But generally speaking, these are the standard values usually that are used for the mouth open parameter anyway. Once you have the main values in for your parameters, you can fine-tune it using the in parameters. So in my case, it was already set at 0, so if I actually bring it back to 0, you can see that there's some slight issues with the mouth slightly opening and closing. I find that by just refining it slightly by saying 0.1 instead, it makes it definitely close until I'm actually speaking, generally. Those kinds of fine-tuning can really help out too. It's a bit hard to give an example though, because like I say, these things can be quite situational. I would recommend using the in values on the left because I actually think it's kind of important to see the values on the far right of the actual original values that your Live2D parameter has, to see it at its full potential. Feel free to mess around and see what works for you. You can technically mess around with these out parameters as well if you wanted to, by say making this 2.5 for example. You can see that the red point has stopped halfway there, so that could kind of make your mouth a little bit more snappier by bringing it a bigger value than the actual original value. You can effectively give it a snappier movement or a faster movement through that edit that we just did. If you were to make the value smaller, so let's say 0.5, you can see that again that's actually going way above the amount, but it also means that you're going to have a subtler movement going on with your mouth. So as you can see, it's not as expressive as before. But again, this is all on personal preference. Whichever way you decide to do it is really up to you. But that is an option. If you did want to mess with just the out parameters on the side, on the far right of the settings, you could do that if you wanted to. So I'll bring it back to how it is. If you were to mess around with the in parameters here, say if we made this 2, you can see that again it's kind of brought it halfway again on this part here. So it does actually a similar kind of thing as what we just did with the outs, and that's why I'm thinking anyway that there's not much of a difference between the two. And I personally think there's something in seeing the original values on the far right being influenced by the in parameter values. Hopefully that makes sense, I don't know, but it's something I'm still trying to figure out myself a little bit, like trying to get the perfect mouth positions and shapes and everything. If we were to edit, say, the 0 in the out position to, say, 0.5, you'll see that the mouth is actually slightly open, like that. If we bring it to 1, it's definitely open, you see? So hopefully that makes some kind of sense by just giving you a short demonstration of how it all works. But that's the way you can edit your parameters so you can make it work the way you want it to. The mouth, in this case, is the only example that I can give you, but the same principles still apply for all of the other parameters in general. Just mess around with it, check it out, make it work for you. In the end, like I say, everyone's model is different, so just feel free to trial and error it a little bit and see if you can come up with a combination of values that works for you. There is ways of fine-tuning, like I say. In my case, sometimes the mouth slightly opens, so the way that you can deal with that is just by changing these values that you're seeing on the left and right. Now, of course, this question mark button here, this actually takes you straight to their documentation. So if you want to read the documentation from Vtube Studio, which it will literally explain everything you could ever need to know about Vtube Studio, click on that and you will be sent to the documentation file. I will say though, at this current moment in time, they haven't actually updated it for the PC version, but I can definitely say that a majority of the information that's in that documentation still applies to the PC version. They may just not have other new features like the audio-based lip sync and other webcam settings. If you happen to be watching this in the future, this has probably been ironed out and has been edited, and you'll be able to get all the information that you need there, no problem at all. So you've now done everything you needed to do with your options for your Vtuber model. Now if you get out of the parameter settings and such, you'll be left with your Vtuber model as is. We're going to go into like the other side menu buttons here. You can't see them right now, but all you have to do is double click on the background like that. So here we have the backgrounds for Vtube Studio. You can literally set whatever background you want. They have plenty to choose from, like this one. But there is like so many you can choose from. We can have a pink background, which is very basic really, but we got bubble bath, like basically bubbles and stuff. It's so cool, really nice animated backgrounds, some of them as well. Got squares as well, look at that. Pretty neat stuff, right? It's awesome. Got something called Fruit Festival where you can have raining fruit. It's really cool, really nice. So I'll leave it to you guys to have a bit of an explore. There is actually an option to pick your own colour, so if you go on Colour Picker, it will actually pop up with this, which I think is also pretty fantastic stuff. But what they're saying is that using the game capture option in OBS, you can give it full-on transparency without needing to chroma key anything. So it's basically showing you one of the settings that you can tick when you use the game capture source in OBS. So if you have that ticked, and then you click on OK, and you have this enabled, transparent in capture, it will look transparent in OBS, and it is probably one of the most cleanest transparencies I've ever seen. It's so good, it's so much better than trying to chroma key anything out and using like a green screen background. This is fantastic, but just saying though, for anyone who does happen to want a color background, you can make whatever color background you want. Now this little icon here is also another really awesome feature. Never seen this in any other face tracking software, but this allows you to add items to your Vtuber model, which is just fantastic stuff. You can also have animated items too, which I'll show you here. We've got some Christmas lights here. So this is actually asking you to place it either in front of your Vtuber model or behind your Vtuber model. In this case, if you start moving the slide like this, I tend to like put it about literally here if I want it in front of my Vtuber model. And then pick pin item to Live2D model right there, which will make it track the model of your Vtuber model. And click OK. You'll see that the item is here. You can also resize it like this with the scroll wheel on your mouse, and you can already see that the animated image is actually following the movement of my Vtuber model. Really cool stuff, right? You can also get rid of it using the trash can in the corner of the screen right there. It only appears when you drag it to the right corner of the software. So there's a lot you can mess around and play with here. There's a lot of really nice images as well. You got dancing pudding as well, which I think is fantastic stuff. Really cool. Let me show you. So you can size this little guy down and have him literally on your head for all eternity if you want. So just to say, for anyone who is interested in having animated items for your Vtuber model, it's got to be in a PNG format, but it has to also be a sequence of frames in a folder. So I'm going to actually show you what it looks like, this little guy, in the folder of Vtube Studio. So if we go and look for the files again through the Vtube Studio project files, like we did with the importing of the model, if we go on streaming assets and then find the items folder, you'll see everything that the software has to offer. So we've got blankets, we've got bread, we've got drinks and a sofa and hats and some sunglasses too. Pretty neat, huh? These folders here are the animated assets. So if we go and find Dancing Pudding here, you can see that each frame has been saved as individual PNG files, but they're also numbered in sequence. Now in Photoshop, there is a function when you create animation to save a PNG sequence. This will allow you to take a GIF or whatever animation, it could even be a video footage, so that Photoshop can save the individual frames for you and number it for you too. But that's like a whole other potential tutorial video, right? But the general idea is, though, even if you don't have that ability to do that, saving your PNG file in this kind of sequence, so in this case it says 0001, the next one is 0002, 0003, and so on. As long as you're doing that, it will work. So I would actually go so far as to say use the same naming convention and it should work no problem at all as far as the animation goes. When you look at other files though, they will do things a little bit differently, but you'll see a pattern here that it will say headpat underscore G underscore 1. This will say headpat underscore G underscore 2, and so on. Basically, the naming convention has to be exactly the same except for that end number, right? So hopefully that makes sense. A little bit of knowledge at least on how to make your own animated items in Vtube Studio. You can also lock your Vtuber model in place as well as your items. So in this case I can actually lock my model into place, so I can't move my model anymore using the dragging, and I can't resize it or anything like that. And the same can be used for the items too. So this is the item padlock here. It says locked all items, and I can't move that either now. It's stuck on my head until I decide to unlock it. Now I'm realizing that maybe this is a little bit bugged out because I'm trying to actually unlock the item and it's not doing it. So I guess this is stuck on my head now. Great. So in any case, that is supposed to be a thing that you can lock and unlock. Another way of locking an item into place as well is if you double click on the item itself too, which I'm trying to do right now, but it just doesn't seem to be unlocking or anything. But you can lock it in place by double clicking on the item. I would actually recommend to do that, because at least then you can double click on it again and it will unlock, you know. So yeah, with that I think we've pretty much covered everything we needed to know so far about Vtube Studio. Everyone has the opportunity to use this because it is currently free. Just to let you know what happens when you get the free version. If you have the free version of Vtube Studio, you actually have the logo here on the side, along with the little cute animated chibi going on in the corner there. So if you don't purchase the DLC that comes with it, you'll have this in the corner, which may not be the most convenient thing to have in the corner if you're actually wanting to utilize the space that you have in the software. But when you do purchase the DLC, which is effectively purchasing the software, it's still quite cheap. So, you know, I do recommend it if you really like the software and you want to use it properly for your VTubing needs and such. Support the developers because they're doing an awesome job with what they're doing right now. I think it's all fantastic stuff so far. But yeah, if you do happen to get the DLC though, you can turn the logo off so you don't have the logo in the corner anymore. So we reached the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful in learning how to use Vtube Studio and how to put your VTuber model into Vtube Studio, and how to create animations and on and off toggles for your VTuber model also. Generally speaking, I hope that it kind of at least gives you a bit of a head start into learning how to use the software, because it's a very good software and I recommend it for anyone who's even wanting to dabble into VTubing at this point. It's such a good and up-to-date software that I can't recommend it enough at this point. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you would like to see more content like this in future. And also share the videos out to anyone who you think will find these videos useful, or for anyone who's just interested in what it takes to create a VTuber model, and even anyone who's into animation as well. It would help me out a lot, so please share it out if you can. And yeah, I hope to see you all in the next one. Take care of yourselves out there and have a good one. Bye guys, see you later. Bye bye!